Hi, my name is Easton. This is my co-host Chris, and this is the RockFace Studios Game Design Podcast. Welcome, everybody. This is our inaugural episode of our podcast. We are planning on recording these once a month or so to basically track our progress a little bit through our game design journey. Our sort of our idea with this is to really kind of take you along with that journey. We are both kind of young, eager designers, and we're both kind of learning as we go. We definitely don't profess to be, the most expert designers of all time, but we are very ambitious and motivated, and really enjoying the kind of the learning process, the journey of discovery in this field. So, yeah, we plan on doing deep dive conversations on a lot of different topics. Today, we're going to keep it pretty light. We're going to give you kind of a sense of who we are, what we've been doing the last year and 8 months that we've been established, and then a little bit of an idea for what's to come. And then we'll dive into a little bit more actual kind of like granular game design towards the end of this. Um, yeah, feel free, Chris. Maybe share a little bit about yourself and maybe some thoughts that you have about just kind of what we're trying to get out of this podcast.
Yeah, I agree with what Eason said. And I think just putting ourselves out there, opening up the discussion as some newer designers, I think a lot of people are probably in a similar place of discovery with their design process. And in addition to game design, we're trying to build community, and hopefully, this will get some discussion going around these topics that we're interested in and actively learning about. I'm very motivated to get better at this craft and having a lot of fun learning all the tips of the trade, tools of the trade. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's been fun.
Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, I want to start a little bit kind of like a year in review. We are actually recording this on New Year's Day. It might not come out on that day, but also it might. So anyway, good time to kind of look at where we've been. We did establish in April of 2024, so we've actually been around for, like I said, about a year and 8 months. So looking forward to our kind of 2 year anniversary here. It's been pretty low key. We've been just kind of doing a lot of kind of designing in the background. We've been hosting game nights out here in Colorado where we're located. And we have just been kind of learning a lot. I know Chris has been doing a lot of work kind of just like learning about what it means to be in this game design industry space. I know I've been just sort of in a little hole designing game after game and forcing Chris to play them with me. So we have a little bit of kind of different roles we play, but we both do both. We design together. We both had games that we kind of brought to the table, and those are our two main games that we are looking to potentially produce in 2026. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Um, and then again, we're both kind of learning about what it means to be in this industry. So, Chris, maybe if you want to jump into a little bit of a retrospective of what it's been like for you for the past year and a half or so.
Yeah, I think some of the main things I've been focusing on is production, which has been a whole adventure in itself. The board game industry has been really tough with tariffs and the cost to produce. We were looking at self production and got pretty far in that process and had to halt it. But hopefully, we sort of rethought how we produce the game to get it down to a reasonable cost. But I think producing a game within the bounds of a budget where you can make money has been sort of a challenge on top of the board game design itself, because you can't have all the components you might want and still keep your costs down. So that's been an interesting road that we've learned and went down. So hopefully self-publishing our first game sometime next year.
This
And
year.
then yeah, the other side I think has been uh, we have decided to go with all artists sourcing a lot locally for our games, but we have decided to take on the UI design and anything along with that. And so that's been another journey of learning, trying to do card functional UI design, and then starting to move a little bit more high fidelity to where we're getting to a producible product. So those have been outside of game design pretty big areas between production and UI UX design that have really been new, kind of outside of what I imagined when we started a board game design company.
Yeah, it's crazy all of the things that you don't realize when you're like starting this process that you little things you need to learn. Um, I know one thing for us has been kind of a journey of sourcing artwork. We've tried a lot of different connections, and we've tried getting some mock-ups from people on Fiverr, which kind of hasn't gone the best so far. We have I've dabbled in a little bit of artwork, so I've done a little bit in the past for the games, but it's not quite at the quality that I think both of us really want for the game. Um, we've kind of settled on trying to partner with some established artists, um, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that once we look at kind of looking forward to this year. Um, but that's been a whole journey, the UI, like Chris was saying, I think it's yeah, it was surprising how difficult it was. We put a lot of effort into designs, and then we compare them against sort of established game products, and it's like there's still something missing. We're continuing to kind of like tweak that process and change our resources and tactics there to try to get it to a kind of a finished state that we're really happy with. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
I think there's a lot of products that get released too that are just lacking on UI design. So it's hard to even find enough good examples that are in the genre you're going for. There's probably more bad examples of UI design available in the space than there are good examples. But it's an
yeah.
incredibly hard thing to get right because you're putting so much information in a small space usually. So it's just, yeah, I think a lot of people end on good enough, but hopefully we're more picky than that and can do better.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've been talking a lot about is kind of the use of iconography, and that's a whole rabbit hole itself about like, when does it make sense to spell something out? When does it make sense to kind of condense that into a single icon? How many icons is too many? How can you make an icon appear in a text box or on a card in a way that actually kind of shortcuts it for the consumer, the gamer, the person who's playing the game. Ultimately, we want these game pieces to be, easily recognizable, easy to digest, and easy to actually play as that game piece. And I think a lot of that does go back to like how do you format the information and how do you use icons or not in different kind of spaces. I know Chris, you've kind of delved down that rabbit hole quite a bit, so you might have more to share on
Yeah.
that.
I think part of a theme that's emerging that's been a constant struggle. I think that's any creative endeavor or design process is elegance. So trying to achieve elegance. And that's generally simplicity on the surface with complexity underneath. And iconography or the way you present the UI is a primary way you can achieve elegance with people interacting with your game. And so just chess is sort of one of the best examples of an elegant game that has very few rules and infinite depth. And so it's been a particular struggle, I think, for us and kind of how deep we like to get into the mechanics of games or how deeply we explore the options to keep it light enough to be approachable and still have the depth that's rewarding. So I think that'll be a journey for us, finding where that knob and that dial fits to meet approachability and enough depth to sink your teeth into. So that's always a talking point we're touching on with design.
Yeah, yeah. Easy to learn with a lot of emergent depth that comes out of the game is always kind of the goal. I think that's something that's been a big part of like my journey. Is I think my natural inclination as a designer is to design things that are a little that have that depth built in kind of at the outset, not so much something that is easy to digest and then you find the depth later. I think that is something I'm still kind of working on um,
Mm-hmm.
that that I will continue to. Um, what are some other kind of things that happened in the last year and 8 months or so since we established when we were first establishing, we were actually on a trip for we were playing competitive Flesh and Blood, a trading card game. For those unfamiliar, we were in Amsterdam, and we were actually just walking through like a market, and we found a an artist booth, and we made a connection there, and we actually commissioned our logo through that artist. So that was kind of like a cool just thing that happened. We made that connection just living our best game lives, and we found this artist that we really liked. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know, what are some other anecdotes of what's happened in the last year and a half?
Um, so we started off by incorporating our business. I think that was uh, we do a lot of little things like this podcast is a good example to motivate us to stay engaged with this craft. And the more you can make yourself accountable, the better I think you can keep outputting work because we both do this as a side gig. And so I think incorporating the LLC was the first step to be like, okay, this is a real business. We're going to actually try to be successful in this field, put out games, sell games. So we do a lot of little steps to keep us, I guess, engaged with it, where we externally to our own motivation hold ourselves accountable to something. So that's been a pretty big step. I think for other people looking to get serious, it's pretty cheap to do a LLC, very little upkeep. And I do think overall it's been worth doing just to stay motivated, stay engaged with it, and really feel like, more like a real company rather than a hobbyist. So that's been a pretty big development and step for us. Um, Trying to think some other things that are worth mentioning. I don't want to dive too far into the art,
Yeah.
but we did find an artist who we'll talk about later that's working on Fibonacci's Harmony. We're in the process talking to another artist for Amnesis, which we plan to release first. So those were pretty big milestones. It's been quite a journey. Um,
That's the first time we've mentioned those. Those are our two established games that we're working on. So just to kind of dive into that a little bit, because it makes sense to talk about it in the year in review, because yeah, it's been a big part of what we have been working on since we started. Both of these games we have been working on for about a year and a half. Yeah, Amnesis I brought to the table, and I actually had a version of that before we started partnering together in this endeavor. Um, and that's the game that we're looking to self-produce first. We're looking to do that hopefully Q1 or Q2 of this year. So what we should have product that we can actually, put into the hands of our followers, and actually get that kind of dispersed and have a little bit more of a footstep in that way, a footprint, I should say, in that way.
yeah,
And then
I would add that we're looking to start production within 3 to 6 months, and really the only step is that we need to finalize the art.
mhm.
And then once we send it off, I think we're looking at a 3 to 6 month turnaround until we have product to sell that we're going to sell and distribute ourselves for our first round of production. And then we might look at other methods later, but that's what we've chosen for this product.
Yeah, it's fully designed. It's going to have probably a couple tiny balancing tweaks here towards the end, but that game is ready to go. Really, we have been on the artwork journey for quite some time, but we are making some progress in that regard, and we found an artist we really, really like for this game. So hopefully some progress there. And then afterwards, later this year, Q3, Q4, we're looking to really start focusing on Fibonacci's Harmony. That's the game that Chris brought to the table, so I'll let him talk mostly about that. But I'll just say that that one we're looking to probably do like a game found or a Kickstarter for. And we'll talk a little bit more about the artwork. We might as well. We've said it 3 times. We might as well talk a little bit about Fibonacci and the artwork journey there, if you want to, Chris.
Um, Yeah, I would bring in just a couple more things that are year in review
Yeah,
before we go into depth.
sure.
So I did want to mention that we are doing the local game nights, and I want to do an open invite to everyone that's local around the Denver area to join us. We do game nights every other Tuesday. Um, pretty much without missing any. We even did one on the 23rd, right before Christmas. And so we've currently been doing those at Rhino Beer Garden. Also, shout out to Brews, who got us started. Was a long-term home for our game nights, and we ended up moving to a new location later this year. And so we do game nights, and we are up for moving around and going to some different areas of town. So if you want to see us run a game night, um, we have a few games that we can bring and teach.
Yeah.
This is like half the collection, I think. It's kind of ridiculous, but um, so we do a combination of teaching games that we've designed. If people are wanting to try out some RockFace Studios games, or people bring their own games to teach, or we bring from our collection and teach those. So I would say it's about 80% published games, and it's been nice for us to be able to explore both the teaching side of board games and also um, exposing us to a lot of board games we wouldn't otherwise play. And so we've been doing a lot of that, and I think that's been a big part of the journey, and also just part of the community building. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to mention that and open the invite to everyone around.
Yeah, and
And 6 to 9 p.m.
we'll link our socials in the description of this video. So if you want to follow us, you can do that. We are. Would you say we're most active like on Discord in terms of like sending updates on like where we're gonna be on those game nights and stuff? Because we have jumped around to a couple different breweries, so
Yeah.
you'll wanna follow us to make sure that you know which Tuesday is gonna be the on week, and also make sure that we're gonna go to that Rhino Beer Garden or somewhere else potentially. We're
Yeah,
still trying
I
to
would
find like
say,
our long-term home. We really want to find the best environment with good parking, good lighting, not too noisy, things like that. So that's been a bit of a
food.
journey.
Yeah. I would say for getting a hold of us, Discord is great. If you don't like Discord, we always post the events on Facebook. And then you can message us on Discord or Facebook if you want details about any last minute updates. But usually, if we change the location, we will also post that in the Facebook event. So you can find out several different ways where we're
And,
going to be.
and we have people who come who bring their own game too. I don't know if you mentioned that, but if you have a game that you've been really wanting to play, maybe bring it in hand, and then the first time or two that you join us, I'm sure we can find time to get a game of that going. And then of course we do demo some of our games there. So that's exciting too to be able to kind of play early iterations of some of the games that we're working on. Um, so that's a good shout out. I'll also shout out that we did have it's a long time removed from now, but I mean we are doing our whole kind of journey and review. We did have a launch party out here in Colorado that was quite successful. We had about 50 plus people at any given time throughout that night. I'll probably link. We had a fellow YouTuber local out here who did a little video about that launch party. So we'll link that in the description as well, so you can kind of get a sense of how that kind of went, and you get to see some really early iterations of these two games that we've been talking about in action there. And we give a little bit of some teasers about kind of what they're about and stuff as well. So, cool. All right. What else? What else? What else is there to review?
Well, since we're going completely off the top of our heads, I think that's the end of what on the top of my head. If we think of something, I'm sure we'll come back
Yeah,
to
yeah,
it. But
yeah. As you all can tell, it's pretty casual. Maybe as time goes on, this podcast gets less casual, but we do kind of want it to be more of like an authentic, just kind of conversation. One of the things that inspired this was Chris and I get into these rabbit holes about game design topics, and sometimes they can be distracting from things we really need to be talking about, but also they're always very interesting. And we figure why not just record those conversations and share them with other aspiring designers or just interested people. And so, again, in the long run, we will just be kind of having very casual conversations about game design in general. Um, but if there's anything in particular you want to see from this podcast series, also we're very interested to hear from you. So let us know. Um, with that being said, I will transition us into looking forward to 2026. And I'll go ahead and start us off with some plans for Amnesis. Delve a little bit more into that. So we've already hinted at a lot of this, but Amnesis is it's like a telepathic battle of wits game where you are trying to get your opponent to a state of complete amnesia before they do that same thing to you. It's a game that utilizes a face-up hand zone, hand of cards, and so a lot of public information, and you are manipulating cards which represent your memories across zones that are labeled like long-term memory, short-term memory, working memory, forgetting, and ultimately amnesia zone if you lose them completely. So you're using those mechanics like remembering and storing memories and things like that to manipulate them throughout these zones, and ultimately again try to get your opponent to amnesia before you do. That's kind of the elevator pitch of the game, I'd say. It's a game that we really like. It plays kind of like a 1v1 kind of card game, which kind of definitely is where our strengths are because we both are competitive card gamers, first and foremost, and then we have kind of moved from that into this design space. So a lot of us designing is trying to get away from a lot of the things we've learned from trading card games, to be honest, because not a lot of those game design tenets really like port over really well to actual board games. I mean, it can, but for mass appeal, not so much. But if you are somebody who, as a lot of our audience is, because of where we came from, if you're somebody who's interested in card games, then this game might interest you a fair bit. Again, we are currently talking with an artist who actually has some we found an artist with an established portfolio that we really like for the card game. So we're not over the finish line there, but we're hoping to partner with her and commission use of her established works. And if that is the case, then the journey from establishing that relationship to printing might be kind of shorter because they're already created. So that's pretty exciting. And I'm excited to potentially show you those cards, those game pieces with that artwork on them. Um,
I wanted to mention that just a little more in depth because we touched on the art journey.
mhm.
I think we went down a lot of different roads to commission original art, including Fiverr, including local artists, and there's a amount of time and effort that takes. And so we had the idea to look for artists that already match our vision for the art and see if we can commission already finished prints for this game that we would license specifically for the game, but we always want the artist to be able to sell those prints on their own and make money off of them as well. So it was just a different way to approach it, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to get art, as opposed to what I thought of first is like, oh, somebody's got to design something specific, and maybe you can go the other direction, and that's been pretty successful so far in the stage of the conversation we're at.
Yeah, and I feel like it bears speaking about just a little bit, obviously, kind of what AI artwork has done to art in general, but also this space. Um, and
Talk about a rabbit hole.
yeah, for sure. Chris and I
Always
have
this.
had a lot of conversations about this because there are companies that are very transparently, some not so transparently, using AI artwork for their finished products and ultimately converting those art assets, if you want to call them that, into income for their company. And that's sort of where we definitely draw the line. Um, is we've decided that basically we are not interested in ever making money off of AI artwork. That is our current philosophy. We won't get into the endless rabbit hole about the sort of the opinions there, the ethics around it, all that. We're very aware of a lot of the viewpoints in this space, and ultimately, we, I think, as a coming from a point of like integrity, we want to not make money off that, but also I feel like kind of that aside, or also using that as a framing device, we're really motivated to actually like partner with artists. And again, we tried the Fiverr thing. For those of you who don't know, it's just an opportunity to connect with people, artists all around the world, and get ultimately, if I'm being honest, very cheap artwork. Not to say quality, but just the cost is very low to us as the commissioner. Um, and I think that our experiences reflected, like the end result, reflected the amount of money we put into it. And so we're kind of, I don't know. And we care about local. We are doing these local game nights. We're really trying to build a community out here in Colorado. We care about partnering with artists, and we really want to kind of go back to maybe some earlier roots and just kind of double down on this idea of really commissioning pieces. We're going to talk a little bit about the Fibonacci artwork, but those are, paint on canvas, beautiful pieces that we're making already. And even I think some digital artwork, um, AI aside, even some digital artwork, I feel like a lot of the artwork you see in games feel very similar. And so we really want to, yeah, go back to kind of the roots of what it means to have artwork for games and produce some really beautiful original pieces. So anyway, Chris, you can take it from here. I'm kind of rambling.
I think stylistically, though, both Easton and I came in with games we had envisioned on our own, but the art style we were envisioning was very compatible. And I think you'll see that in both games, what we've commissioned for them, where it's sort of like this visionary psychedelic feel that sort of brings to the forefront this community of artists that has traditionally been found in the music scene at music festivals and things like that. So it's I think it'll be a way we stand out, and our first, I guess it was our first official like vending event. We had a ton of interest coming up, just calling out kind of the look of the artwork. It was definitely a way to get people interested in the product. And then once they were able to sit down and play it, we had a lot of good feedback from there too. So we're really excited with this art direction and standing out. And I think it's sort of part of our bigger ecosystem of community, and supporting other artists is really important to us. And I was just going to mention, I think a good topic for a full podcast. We want you to let us know if you want to see it. But I'd love to talk more about how AI is affecting design and art, and kind of how what we're doing to keep real artists at the forefront of what our goals are. And I think what we can provide in this podcast is sort of this perspective of a small newer board game company trying to go to market with a game. I think when you're a larger company, art isn't that much of a barrier, because the amount of copies you're producing, the cost of the art for that many copies per copy is very low. But when you're looking at producing a game like Amnesis, um, or Fibonacci's Harmony, we're looking at like 8 pieces of art for Amnesis, which is so small. And for Fibonacci's, we're looking at probably 25 pieces of art. Um, when the production numbers are like in the 500s to 1,000, finding a way to turn a profit at those margins when you're paying for pieces of art is a really big challenge. And so I think when you're a startup company, if you want to match your morals with supporting art and artists with making money, you have to get pretty creative. And that's what we've been, I guess, sourcing the art from a finished portfolio was one of the ways we did that. But it's really cost prohibitive, and you're taking a big bet on your game. So it's tough. It's tough to go the road we're going, but we feel some conviction to do that.
Yeah, great points. If you want to go ahead and start talking a little bit about Fibonacci's, if you want to introduce that game to our audience, and then talk a little bit about anything you want to in that regard, but also definitely the artwork. I think we've buried the lead enough with that one.
Yeah, it's our most exciting announcement. I was trying
Yeah,
not to get right into
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And so Fibonacci's Harmony is the first game that I brought to the company, and it was some of our first meetings designing that. I had a very rough idea that was done at like 11 p.m. and finished by 3 a.m., which is how a lot of my ideas happen. And so some of our first meetings was co-designing that, really getting it to where it is today. So to tell you about what it is, it's a resource management game for 2 to 4 players. In this game, you're a student and you're attuning and studying with these enlightened sages at the Academy of the Spiral. And so you're studying the Fibonacci sequence to manipulate attributes of mind, body, and soul, and you're trying to achieve these different victory conditions. Ultimately, it's a racing style game to get to 8 points, is the standard finish there. And so the game plays in about 10 to 15 minutes per player, and it's 2 to 4 players. One thing that's been really interesting is just it was designed as a 3 to 4 player game, and 2 players was sort of added as I kind of reworked the math to allow for it to scale up and down with players. And now the 2 player game has been quite a fun way to play it because you can do games in 10 to 20 minutes and kind of reshuffle the victory conditions, which there are 34 different victory conditions, which you play with 8 each game, which are Fibonacci numbers. Which everything in the game, if it can be a Fibonacci number, it is. And so your deck is 21 sages. Everybody has the same 21 cards, and you're using those sages to manipulate your attributes, ultimately scoring those goals. But as you're changing out the goals, the context of what those 21 sages do really changes up. And it's been interesting to see how, sort of, when you reveal the victory conditions, how the meta changes for that game, and sort of what combos you're trying to set up or what cards you're looking for in your hand to go after those combos. So you're mostly trying to race to 8 points for yourself, but you're sort of taking opportunities to disrupt your opponent's strategy when it doesn't slow you down too much. So it's not the most cutthroat game, but it definitely can be if the table decides it's going to be. So it's been a really fun design journey, which we'll talk on. I'm going to talk on one of the really interesting ways that we balance the game when we get into our game design podcast. But it's been quite the journey from where it started to where it is now.
Cool. And then the artwork.
Yeah, so the artwork, we were at a concert at Mission Ballroom.
This is how all these
Watching.
stories go with us.
Yeah, you never know what you're gonna find at a concert. So we were watching Spangle, and they had some live art going. We were checking out the live art, and we we found one artist that we were just really impressed with. We got their business card, and we looked them up, and we are like, oh, they have way too many followers. They're never going to do art for our game. But then Charlene, thanks to Charlene, just my partner and soon to be wife, decided to call Shannon Miguela and see if she was interested. And we just happened to catch Shannon at a really good time where she was looking for new opportunities to sort of expand her circle and where her art is being shown. And being a fan of board games herself, it was a really good sell to her to partner with us for the art of Fibonacci's Harmony. She came to a game night, played Fibonacci's Harmony, really liked the vision for the art and could imagine her art being in the game. And so from there, we've just been working with her. We just revealed our first 3 sages for the citrine triptych. The game has 7 different um, gemstones, and each gemstone forms a triptych of art. And so the citrine ones are available to view on our Instagram and Shannon's Instagram, and we'll link those in the description as well. And we are starting the bronzite, which are like earth and rock style people. And we were just looking at some concept art last night, which I'm really pumped about the early stages of those. And so these prints will be for sale. And just a little plug because we are trying to ultimately make some money to fund our board games. And so as we get these prints available, we do have prints for sale. Just contact us through any of our social media channels and we'll work with you to get those to you. So beautiful artwork. If we're ever at events, we'll have the canvases with us most likely, and we will have prints for sale there. And we're just really excited with the first 3 that got finished, and just really excited to see how the game looks completed with all this artwork on the table.
Yeah, a couple things there. I'm gonna put Shannon's probably Instagram handle in a description, so definitely check her out, follow her. Her artwork is absolutely stunning. I'm so excited about this partnership. Um, and then the other thing I was gonna mention is that this is kind of uh, this Fibonacci's Harmony game. We see it as sort of a gateway into a greater IP that we're looking at establishing and kind of growing. So I know kind of I have a couple other games that one utilizes the Fibonacci sequence a lot. One of them very much leaning into the same sages that are present in the Fibonacci's harmony game that Chris outlined. Um, so there's other kind of games that we're kind of like dancing around that uses the same kind of universe that we're building. So these sages that we're getting artworks for, these are kind of very prominent figureheads in a growing IP that we're excited about. So that's just one other thing I wanted to mention there.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess in our universe too, maybe it's worth mentioning just a little bit about how the Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio. Once you understand and master this, you sort of have control over the universe. You sort of that's where the magic in the universe comes from, and so that's sort of the theme of the Fibonacci's harmony game, where the students are studying to ascend with their understanding of the Fibonacci sequence. And so we're building a whole IP kind of around that concept, and this is the magic in the world.
yeah, it's interesting not to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but the Fibonacci sequence, I think it's what when you first learn about the sequence, it's hard not to like feel like there's something mystical about it. And I think in reality, what it teaches us about the world is just that this sequence is sort of just like the easiest path for the natural world to grow. So like you look at like a pine cone or a flower or something like that that sort of has the Fibonacci sequence kind of built into its structure. When you really get scientific about it, it's you sort of just learn that, oh well, it feels mystical because how is the same sequence repeating everywhere? Is this unifying everything together? And in reality, I think it's just again what science teaches us is that this is just the easiest way for the natural world to kind of grow out to yeah from one point to flower out anything that does that it's just the natural way of being. So again, I'm not going to get too scientific about it, but I think when you dive into it you can have some of like the mystical feeling disappear, but it doesn't change the fact that anyone who learns about it the first time and starts to realize how many places it's just around them. You go for a hike in the woods, the Fibonacci sequence is all around you. It's in our body. People use it in day trading, for the stock market. It's everywhere, and so that feeling of wow, this is kind of like mystical and unifying, and maybe as a building block of the universe almost. We're really leaning into that and kind of taking that sentiment, taking that feeling people have interacting with it, and turning it into exploding into the kind of a whole universe. So I think it's
Yeah.
really exciting. I think it's something we haven't really seen other games really do or IPs really do, and there's a lot for that kind of IP to grow. So pretty cool.
We had some comments at the last market we did, where people are really wanting us to lean into the math. I think people really are drawing to the math of it, and like the actual math and equation is an interesting side, but there's also this whole nature side. So it's a really unique combination of these two concepts, and the more you explore it, the more you learn. It's just so prevalent through everywhere you interact, even all the way out to the big picture is like behavior and patterns. So I just think it's been a really fun exploration to dig into, and the more we learn about it, the more mystical it feels. And so that's the connection, why we feel like this math concept can even fit in a mystical universe. We think it has some attributes of both. We don't
Cool.
make you do a lot of math in Fibonacci's harmony, though, if that scares you.
No, no. I mean, the world is math, and ultimately any game, almost every game can be diluted down to math building blocks. So you're never gonna get away from it in game design, and
Yeah.
rather we'd prefer to lean into it. Um, cool.
Okay.
So moving on a little bit, the other thing we wanted to kind of highlight for this year, and this is going to be very, very current to what we're we're actively working on, which is the Cardboard Edison Award. This is something Chris shared with me a couple weeks ago. It's pretty cool. It's a yearly contest that they do for designers. It's very cheap to submit something, and so it's really enticing for us. Just a great way for us to kind of take another step forward, interact with the design community, really put some of our game design ideas against other really talented designers all around the. I don't know if this is worldwide or country, but at least the country. And yeah, so basically what it is, you submit a game design, you submit like a 5 minute or 2 minute teach, I forget exactly, and like a video of that, and that needs to be submitted by the end of January. So we're kind of currently working on that right now. We're going to submit one or two of our game designs, and then if you are selected as one of the games that makes it to the next stage, then all of the judges basically, I guess they kind of rent out a cabin somewhere or something for a weekend, and then they just kind of just play all the games, take notes, and ultimately move on to like the final grading of it, where people are awarded first, second, third, etc.
Yeah,
So
I would touch on that a little bit because there's a lot of value here, and there's still time. Submissions actually open today, and they close at the end of the month. So if any of you newer designers out there or established ones want to submit, I would recommend it. And so phase one would be your game submission is looked at by a handpicked panel of judges. Um, they don't actually play the game at this stage, but they review your video, they'll look through your rule book, they'll talk about your game. And the big piece that I want to mention is they give you feedback. So your submission fee, you'll get some value out of that from the judge feedback. And then when they go the second round, that happens around March or April, I believe. There's another round where you can make changes based on the feedback and update your game before you submit the prototype to sort of their prototype testing convention, I'll call it. So if you, I think part of our motivation for this is to put our designs out there to an unbiased crowd and get feedback from people in the industry that are very experienced. And I think for the price that they're doing, I feel like it what 25 or $50
it's like
for a
no, it's like
submission.
$20, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
around
so
there.
for the
We'll
price,
we'll
it,
link to the to their
yeah,
website in the description as well. But it's
yeah,
really cheap. So it's like, yeah, if you're in, I feel like getting feedback, getting someone to review your video and getting feedback, and also just the motivation to actually like record the video, go through that process, through that journey, totally worth it.
yep. So we're really excited to work on this month and see, how many games we can get ready to where we feel like we can submit these. And because the cost is so cheap, we're just going to submit the ones we feel are worthy. And sort of we looked through the past winners to rule out games that didn't really fit the mold that they were looking for in this contest. So I would recommend doing that if you have sort of a game you're thinking about submitting, sort of look at things that have been successful in the past because ultimately you do want to make it to that second round and get that really in-depth feedback. Um, so yeah, hopefully we can get a couple games ready and have one or maybe even two make it. I would be tickled if we had one. So we'll see how we do. But this will be our first game design contest, which I think we're going to try to make this a theme of the upcoming year. That we look out for these either contests where you're looking to submit a design, maybe win some kind of publishing deal or so forth. This one specifically an award, Cardboard Edison Award that you can brand your game with, like before you go to Kickstarter or whatever you want to do with it. So it helps you get some notoriety for that marketing push. I think is the main, besides the feedback, that would be the main reward for this competition. Also, a theme that we're going to do in this vein would be some companies put out lists of topics they're looking for game design for and sort of finding those and designing within whatever kind of parameters they set may provide a game sale, but it also is just a fun design challenge. And so it's fun to work within a limited set of parameters and see what you can come up with. So both of those things I think will be, 2026, what we're looking to put some time into going forward.
Yeah, and I think our plan is to submit Fibonacci's Harmony, which is exciting, and then potentially one other game. I think we looked at Amnesis and thought against the winners of previous years, not really the type of game that they are looking for, or at least does well. So, if anything, I might submit one of my other kind of designs I have in the works. Kind of just depends on if I can get a product that feels worthy of being submitted by the end of this deadline. But I think for sure Fibonacci's Harmony is one that we're looking to put on there. So we're really hoping that we can get it past the first stage and get it into their hands and get even more feedback. Regardless of how we do, I think we're just excited for the journey there.
Yeah.
Um,
Are there any games that you want to like do little teasers for? I know we have a lot in the works, and Hex Goofs is the one that you're alluding to that could potentially be submitted to this contest, which I just love the name in general, and I love this little hex artwork that Easton's been working on. So Easton had mentioned earlier that I do a lot of the networking and business side. Well, he'll just tell me, "Hey, I went on a design bender. You want to play this new game?"
yeah.
And this is like over the course of a week or less, where there's no game, and then all of a sudden there's a game. And yeah, so are there any games that you're kind of excited about the mechanics, or just like teasing the name, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that, well, touching on what you said, I think that that's definitely going to be a whole podcast in and of itself. It's just like talking about our design processes because everyone kind of has their own unique way of designing, and that's pretty interesting to talk about. For me, I do tend to kind of get a flash of inspiration, and then I go on a bender, and then I kind of get a product that I is ready to sort of test. And I've been encouraged that I think all of my games have been roughly playable from the first iteration. Some of them definitely a little bit more raw than others, but I think it's really fun. And I tend to do a sort of a rotation where like I go through a design bender and I get something that I can kind of share, and then I play a few games with Chris and maybe someone else, and then get a lot of feedback from that. And I think that kind of propels me into my next design that I almost like abandon my current one and I go back to one that I had abandoned before, or I go on to a new design. I'm kind of just going through like a rotation. And I think every time I come back to a design, I come to it with my notes from last time, but also all of my experiences designing other types of games. And every time I kind of complete that circle and come back around to a game, I think I make progress. And I think it's been a slow growth. I don't think that I've made a lot of games that feel even close to something that is a finished product in the last couple of years. But I do feel that steady growth. I feel myself learning these things, and I'm excited to keep on doing the loop.
Yeah.
So
I think one thing you said, though, I want to encourage people to do, and it's easy to get stuck in this design process of this isn't good enough. And that's probably true because when you put it to the table, you're going to want to change your first iteration. And the big thing there is that you get it to the table because there's always, even if the game isn't good, in its current iteration. There's always takeaways or things to learn. And there's usually also things and components of the game that are fun. And so you may keep those in isolation, or you may keep the game as a whole and try to iterate on the current game. But either way, I think getting it to the table has been one of the biggest changes with having Easton and me both working together, because as soon as we have an idea that we can print and prototype, we can play that, and that's been really motivating. Just, ooh, this thing was fun, maybe I should lean into this and see how we can highlight this mechanic. And so it's been a big part of our process to play test early, in the process, rather than just getting lost in this loop of, I don't think this is good enough yet. You don't learn much by that kind of negative loop. Get it to the table and figure out what is keepable and what you need to get rid of, and then iterate and move forward. And then that's what we've done with Amnesis. That's what we've done with Fibonacci's Harmony. And while they're both our first games, I think we feel confident that the offering of those is something we're proud to put, on the table, on the shelf for sale. So that's what I would encourage early designers to do. Your ideas are worth play testing, I think, and it's fun to see your own game being interacted with, and even at a baseline, just, whoa, this works, there's a game that people can play, was a fun thing for me to see. It's something you created in your head, you printed and you put on the table and people had fun playing it. That's a rewarding part of the process.
Yeah, and I'm definitely a big believer in kind of like I guess the common saying that might port over a little bit here is like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? You don't um you don't get to learn from all the design mistakes that you make if you don't make the mistakes to begin with.
Yeah.
And I I'm a pretty big believer in just natural growth. You don't even you don't always have to be like super effortful with your growth. You don't need to watch a training seminar on game design fundamentals. You know that's good too. Do that,
Wait, you're
but
telling them not to watch our podcast?
well, yeah, you don't have to watch this. Honestly, you're better off as an aspiring designer to just trial and error. You know, I know for me, another thing I've been doing a lot is like I have so much experience in the TCG trading card game space, less experience in the board game space. So I know I've also just been going to Chris and being like, hey, force me to just play more board games, you know, or like I'll design a game that Chris will be like, that's kind of similar to this game. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's play that one, and I learn from that. So just like force yourself to do the activities, and I think that really applies to design. Where I've seen it honestly with Chris, and I've seen it with other designers we talk to, where they have a little bit of paralysis to just kind of get their thoughts onto a workable product and just get it played. And I think you get so much there as long as you can kind of take your ego out of it, take your heart out of it a little bit because you are putting your heart into this game a little bit, and then you're putting it onto the table and asking someone to really tear it to pieces and critique it. As long as you can kind of like get above your own ego there and just make it happen, you'll learn so much just naturally from the trial and error of that full process. So if you're somebody who has trouble actually just like committing to it and getting it into a working product and making it happen, I really want to, you know, whoever needs to hear this, just do it. You know, force yourself to do it. Find that friend who's willing to put up with all of your wacky ideas and play the game with you, and you'll learn so much from just experiencing from your thoughts to the game to watching someone play it.
Yeah, we're
Um,
bringing it to our game night. We encourage
yeah,
other designers to bring their prototypes, and maybe we can trade playtest sessions and also some feedback on each other's games. So we love to have other designers show up and bring their own creations. Give us a heads up if you're going to do that, and we'll kind of highlight that you'll be bringing a game, and we'll get some people interested in whatever description you give us of that game.
perfect. Okay, we have about 5 to 10 more minutes before we're looking to wrap this up. I want to end on. I did have one kind of prompt, really focus on just true game design, and it kind of is on theme of this whole kind of like year in review and looking forward, which is that I'm just kind of curious, Chris, what is one kind of thing that you've learned about game design? What's one tenet or yeah, takeaway from all of your experience so far about game design itself, about how to design a game that is appealing to play? What's kind of one takeaway that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I prepped one piece of content for this podcast, and this is it. And so, in Fibonacci's harmony design, we had a lot of feedback around these attributes that the students have, which are mind, body, and soul. And the feedback was that those attributes didn't really have their unique identity while they were being used to sort of send and to complete these goals. Individually, the attributes didn't mean anything. And so we wanted to figure out a way to mechanically make the attributes feel unique and add some kind of theming to them why you might go after mind first or why you might want more soul first. And so we tried adding mechanics to the game, which ultimately broke all of our math. No matter what we did, we kept trying to be additive in this process. And it kept changing the pace of the game, it kept changing how the math worked. And the pace of the game is one thing that's very tight right now. It's been very intentional as far as, how many of your cards you draw throughout the game, how long does the game take. And so we kept, just thinking that one direction until we had this one mechanic where instead of powering up the game, what we did was actually reduce the power level of the game. So originally your hand size was 8. This is just an example. And so we instead changed your max hand size to 5. And what that allows us to do is to kind of introduce people to the game at a slower pace because you're less powerful. While we know that the game's ultimately balanced around a hand size of 8, now the players are forced to achieve a maximum stat in their mind attribute in order to unlock that hand size of 8. So, hand size of 8 was how the game was balanced, and nobody has to know that. And when they start the game, the hand size is 5. And so now you've basically nerfed your game. But while doing that, you added a mechanic that feels like a power up. And so I think the big lesson was that additive design isn't always the answer. And so once we unlock that hand size idea, every power up was actually just a nerf to a current function of the game, to where once people achieve that power up, now they're full power, which we originally intended. So this is just a really interesting concept because it's kind of backwards. How, okay, I need to add this mechanic. Oh, let's rip apart a mechanic rather than adding anything. So I thought that was a really interesting way to solve it. It was a long, many months of conversation, uh, just how to add this one mechanic. And I think we finally got it right with that kind of approach to it.
Yeah, just to kind of like add a couple of my own thoughts, which is going to be mostly repeating what Chris said, but just kind of putting into terms that it makes sense for my brain, is kind of like it's kind of like a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing, where we had this hole where we had these three attributes that didn't have strong enough identity, and that was true, but also there was this truth of like we're pretty happy with the game as is. So there's this hole, but also things are working well, and so again, we kept on adding to this thing that was already working well, and it crumbled one way or another no matter what we did. And so it's really just kind of the sense of like hybridizing these two things where both can be true, but the only way that both can be true is if you cleanly um, account for this hole, this gap, through what currently already exists. Instead of keep on trying to add to it. So just another way to put it, and I think yeah, it's definitely like a really cool thing that we learned throughout the journey there.
I think
Um,
one kind of continuation of a previous concept was elegance and trying to achieve elegance. I think anytime you add complexity to a game, you're really risking the elegance of your game. And so you have to be very intentional when you choose to add complexity. And by stripping it down, I think you keep the simplicity of it. And so it was another side effect of that approach that additive design generally adds complexity as well. And so both of our first games we want to be pretty approachable. It's important to us as these intro products. And so I think when you're really trying to keep your game clean, consider this as an option.
Definitely. And I'll share just one thing I've learned about game design as well to kind of round out this podcast. And that common theme has to do a little bit with my experience coming from trading card games, um, which is that a lot of my experience, and honestly, what I find the most fun about games is a sort of conflict over each other's finite resources. So whatever the resources and game pieces are in the game, mine interact with yours, yours interact with mine. There's a lot of sort of competition with those things. Sometimes there's even things that feel sort of like attacks on those resources, and it's this direct battle from what I have in my sort of arsenal to what you have, and those collide. And I think that's the lens that I design a lot of games early on. And I think what I've learned from really a few conversations with people about what they enjoy from games, but also just watching people, is I think more commonly to have more mass appeal, people really appreciate having conflict over a shared space rather than conflict over their own resources and their own space. So if I don't know if that's making sense at all, but basically, there's a shared board, shared market, shared space that you both interact with, and then you ultimately pull those resources or hybridize those resources with what you have in front of you directly, your player card, your gathered resources, whatever it might be, and rather than creating the conflict in those spaces, create the conflict in the middle. Create the conflict where the players are sharing space. And yes, I can make a game action that um, interacts with their game plan pretty directly by sort of taking a resource away from them in our shared space. But but it's always through the lens of that shared space, and I'm not going directly into their supply and messing with the plan that they've already kind of established. So it's just changing the point of interaction to a shared space rather than the point of interaction being between our own individual spaces. So I don't know if that made sense. Maybe Chris, you can summarize what I'm saying in a way that's more clear, but that's definitely something that I've really learned, and I think it's very important, especially when you're looking at mass appeal. I think most people, from my experience, are going to appreciate that form of interaction between the players rather than the former.
Yeah, I think conflict is a very interesting thing, and one way I might reframe what you just described is as a question you ask yourself during the design process. And so most designs would have questions that you want to sort of hit your mark on, and this question might be, what is the conflict about, and also how does the conflict feel? And I think, to kind of what you were going in depth on, it's important that the conflict doesn't feel too punishing for the individual player that's being attacked, especially a consideration in multiplayer games, to where you have to consider if one player is attacking one other player, you have to make sure that that attack either doesn't feel too targeted or too punishing to where one player now feels like they're out of the game or out of the race if they get targeted too much. And so balancing that conflict with the particular word, how does this feel to this player, has been a conversation point for us. And there's been some really interesting, the shared space concept, or rewarding the player that gets attacked, or rewarding the player um, for blocking a space. I think when you turn conflict into reward, it's an interesting way to approach it. And I think this could be several of these things, like could be design topics on their own.
Yeah.
But I think you should have, going into your design, some major questions that you ask yourself. What is the conflict? How long is this game taking? How many players? Just these kind of things. And when you have all those outlined, it helps give your game design direction and a goal. And I think the conflict is so core to the game when it's a player versus player game, which we haven't. I don't think we've designed it co-op yet. Maybe we'll quit fighting one time. But right now, all of our games are conflict driven, whether some are more heavy conflict driven than others. But just really asking yourself how you want that conflict to be framed and how you envision it playing out during your game, I think is just really important to keep front of mind as you're designing, and designing with a goal for that game.
Yeah, one last thing I'll add is Chris mentioned about having it be less punishing, and that is also something that's good to keep in mind. Although I will also say that if it even if it is really punishing for me to interact with the shared space in a way that affects your game plan, it's still way better than me going directly into what feels like yours in the game. What feels like this is something that I own. Players are much more defensive over the resources they feel like they've already accumulated or already worked to get, right? So even if I make a game action in the shared space that is punishing, that is game winning, game altering, all that, it's not going to feel as bad to the person receiving that sort of that really punishing game action. It's not going to feel as bad because it is in that shared space. Just the very nature of where you're interacting matters. So just one other thing I wanted to add on your
Yeah.
point there.
It does allow more people to play your game as well, because there's a pretty strong split in the board gaming audience that's even willing to directly attack another player.
Yeah.
Even if you put that mechanic in your game, you will have, I'd say, 25% of your player base just refuse to attack another player just because they don't like that feeling. And so if you're going to
Yeah.
put that in your game, you have to be really careful. And I think when you make it a shared space, it sort of blunts that effect, where well, yeah, you're attacking their plan, but you're not attacking their things, right? And so those things feel very different when we're talking about how it feels to be attacked.
Yeah, when you're designing a game, you can never count on your players not acting as pacifists. uh, so factor that in. All right. Well, I think we did it. Um, did we do it, Chris?
I think that was kind of what we decided to do.
All right, cool. Well, we
I
did
think we
it.
did that right.
As always, open to feedback. Again, look in the description below. I have a list of 4 things that we mentioned that we'll link to. Um, Reach out to us, give us feedback. I'm pretty sure if someone, says, "Hey, I'd love to hear you talk about this topic," chances are we probably will because we have no plans for the future right now. We just want to get on here, talk about game design, and help other game designers grow. So I think that's it. So with that being said, for RockFace Studios, I am Easton.
I'm Chris. Thanks for joining us this time. Let us know what you want to hear about in future episodes, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.
Bye, guys.